The smell hits you first, not horses, not sweat. Something sharper, copper mixed with smoke, the scent of a world ending. You're 16, crouched behind what used to be your father's shop. And through the gap in the scorched wood, you see them riders moving through your street with the methodical efficiency of men harvesting wheat. They're not screaming. That's what terrifies you most. The silence. Just the sound of boots, the scratch of styluses on tablets, the occasional command in a language that sounds like wind through a canyon. A hand grabs your shoulder. You try to scream, but nothing comes out. A man turns your face left-right, examines your teeth. He marks something on parchment. You don't know it yet, but you've just been categorized, numbered, entered into a system so vast and so efficient that 800 years from now, scientists will find the evidence written in the blood of 16 million people. Before we go deeper, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. It genuinely amazes me that a story this dark, this buried, can reach someone in Sao Paulo, in Jakarta, in Chicago, all searching for the same hidden truth. This is Samarkand, 1220, the jewel of the Silk Road, a city where Persian poets debated philosophy in gardens cooled by mountain springs. Where your grandmother taught your mother a carpet pattern that had survived 4 generations of women's hands. That pattern died last Tuesday. The girl behind the burned shoplets call her Zarina because history never bothered to record her actual name, doesn't understand yet what's happening. She thinks this is war. Conquest. The kind of thing that ends when the fighting stops. She has no idea she's witnessing something unprecedented in human history. The industrialization of erasure. The Mongols didn't invent cruelty. Every empire before them had killed, enslaved, destroyed. But Genghis Khan understood something that made him fundamentally different from every conqueror who came before. He understood that swords win battles, but wombs win centuries. And he was playing a game with a timeline measured in generations, not years. The man who would build this machine wasn't born a monster. In 1171, he was a 9-year-old boy named Temujin, watching his father convulse and die on the frozen Mongolian steppe. Foam drying on blue lips, poisoned by rivals who'd shared salt with him the night before. His father's allies vanished within a week. His mother Holland was left with 5 children in a winter so brutal that chronicles say wolves came to the tent doors. They ate roots, field mice, leather boiled until it softened. Temujin learned the lesson that would define everything. The world is divided between those who take and those who are taken from. At 16, the lesson became personal. His betrothed Bert was kidnapped by the Merkits, a rival tribe. He spent 8 months tracking them, gathering allies, planning. When he finally raided their camp and brought her back, Bert was pregnant. Was it his child or her captor's? He never knew. But standing in that burned camp, surrounded by dead Merkits, something crystallized in his mind. The men who violated Bert were dead. But what they did to her would continue in the child she carried. Violence by sword ends when the soldier dies. Violence by bloodline echoes forever. He raised Bert's son as his own, but he stored the lesson like a weapon in an armory, waiting for the day he'd need it. That day came in 1219. By then, Temujin had become Genghis Khan, universal ruler commander of an army that had unified the Mongolian steppe for the first time in history. And he'd just received a box containing the severed heads of his trade ambassadors. The Khwarezmian Shah, ruler of an empire stretching from the borders of India to the edge of Europe, had executed Mongol envoys, shaved their beards as the ultimate insult, and sent their heads back as his answer to diplomacy. The Shah thought he was dealing with another steppe raiding party. Barbarians who'd retreat at the first show of force. He had no concept of what he'd awakened. Genghis Khan gathered his commanders in his tent. The chroniclers recorded his words, and they're chilling in their clarity. I will make them a lesson that echoes for 1,000 years. I will tear out their roots so completely that their grandchildren's grandchildren will not remember they existed. He didn't mean kill everyone. He meant something far more thorough. He meant to erase them from time itself. But here's what makes this story different from typical conquest narratives. Genghis Khan didn't just unleash violence, he unleashed bureaucracy. Before his armies even reached the first Khwarezmian city, he sent scoutsmen disguised as merchants who infiltrated urban centers and did something no conquering army had done before. They took census, ages, family lineages, occupations, physical conditions, specifically for women. They were counting reproductive capacity the way other generals counted fortress walls. When Bukhara fell in February 1220, the sorting began. The Mongols separated the population into groups with the precision of merchants grading silk. Men of fighting age eliminated or conscripted. Elderly released to spread terror to the next city. Women divided into categories based on age, health, education, childbearing potential. Noble women to officers. Literate women to administrative households. Young, healthy, common women to soldiers. The others, the old, the sick, the injured, the Mongols, had a phrase for them. It appears in multiple chronicles, not worth the food. Zarina watched her mother push toward the group walking to the river. She screamed her mother's name. Her mother screamed hers. A soldier struck Zarina so hard she couldn't breathe for 30 seconds. When her vision cleared, her mother was gone. Zarina never learned what happened to the group that went to the river. No one talked about them. They simply stopped existing in the records. A Mongol woman, not a prisoner, an administrator, walked down the line of captives with a wooden tablet. She stopped at Zarina, checked the mark on her wrist that a scribe had made earlier, and made a notation. Officer section, literate. Persian. That was it. Zarina's entire future decided in the time it takes to choose a horse at market. The caravans began moving east. Hundreds of carts filled with women from Bukhara, from Samarkand, from Urgench, a logistical operation that would have impressed Roman quartermasters. The Mongols had supply lines, medical staff for pregnant women. Administrators tracking every captive by number and category. This wasn't the chaos of traditional warfare. This was a system. And Genghis Khan personally reviewed the reports. The Persian chronicler Malik Juvain, writing decades later with access to Mongol administrative records, describes how the Khan received monthly updates. Numbers captured, numbers pregnant, numbers who'd given birth, mortality rates during transport. When the initial numbers showed too many women dying in transit, he issued new protocols. Better food for pregnant captives. Medical attention. Penalties for soldiers who damaged valuable inventory. Read that again? Medical attention for captives. Not out of mercy, out of optimization. He was engineering a system, and like any engineer, he measured success through output. The woman Zarina sat next to in the cart was named Fatima, teacher from Bukhara, who'd had a husband, had children, had a home where students came to learn poetry. On the fourth night of travel, Fatima whispered her story to Zarina in Persian, speaking fast as if afraid she'd forget the words. Then she stopped talking entirely. Just stared at the horizon with eyes that had stopped seeing. 3 weeks later, when the cart jolted over rough terrain, Zarina realized Fatima had died sometime in the night, probably hours ago. Her body was stiff. The caravan didn't stop. They pulled Fatima off the cart and left her beside the road. But Samarkand and Bukhara were just the testing ground. In April 1221, the Mongols reached Merv, possibly the largest city in the world. At that moment, population estimates range from 500,000 to over 1 million. A center of learning where libraries held manuscripts from Greece, Persia, India, China. Ibn al-Athir, the Arab historian, called it the mother of cities. The siege lasted 15 days. What happened next? Multiple chronicles agree on the essential facts, even if the exact numbers vary. The Mongols killed between 700,000 and 1 million people. They spent 13 days counting the dead, stacking bodies into pyramids, recording figures. One Mongol general reportedly said, and this line appears in Persian sources, "We have made a desert and called it peace. But for every person killed, a woman was taken. The caravan that left Merv stretched for miles. Women from Persia beside women from Central Asia, beside women from China, speaking languages they'd never heard, all marked, numbered, allocated. The system was now operating at industrial scale. And here's where the story takes its darkest turn, because it's not just what happened to these women. It's what happened inside them. Zarina had been in the caravan for 3 months when she noticed it. She was forgetting that carpet pattern her mother had been teaching her. Was it 3 loops or 4? Did the border curve left or right? What color was the center thread? She tried to trace it in the dirt at night, but pieces were missing. Her mother's face was blurring, the sound of her voice, the way she hummed while working the loom, the smell of the dyes she used fading like paint left in the sun. This is how the system actually worked, not with swords. With time, every day in the caravan, you became less yourself. Your memories eroded. Your language rusted. Your identity dissolved. The Mongols understood this. They deliberately separated women from the same cities. Speaking your native language was discouraged. Friendships were prevented. Isolation accelerates erasure. A woman alone forgets faster than a woman with community. Children born in the caravans were taken at age 3, sent to Mongol families, raised speaking only Mongolian, worshipping the eternal sky. They never learned their mother's names, their mother's languages, their mother's stories. The separation was always sudden one morning. The child would be there, the next morning gone. Mothers who resisted had their food rations cut. Mothers who fought back were beaten. Mothers who tried to hide their children were made examples of. The message was unmistakable. These children don't belong to you. They never did. Some women found small ways to resist, whispered names at night, taught forbidden words to children before they were taken, scratched symbols into their skin marks that reminded them who they'd been. They created secret languages, gestures that meant I remember, patterns traced in dirt that only other captives would recognize. Tiny rebellions. Small flames in an ocean of darkness. Most went out. But some burned for decades, hidden, waiting. The system didn't end when Genghis Khan died in 1227. His sons expanded it. His grandsons refined it. For over 150 years, the machine kept running. Each generation of Mongol rulers had access to the caravans, to hundreds of thousands of women across an empire that eventually stretched from Korea to Hungary. Generation after generation, the genetic material of Mongol nobility was systematically distributed across conquered populations. In 2003, Oxford University geneticists published a study in the American Journal of Human Genetics that shocked the scientific world. They'd found a Y chromosome lineage originating in Mongolia, roughly 1,000 years ago. The carriers? Approximately 16 million men alive today. 0.5% of all male humans on Earth. In Mongolia itself, 8%. In Central Asia, 3%. Even in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, the markers appear. This isn't natural reproduction. Even the most prolific kings don't leave this kind of genetic footprint. Pharaohs ruled for millennia, barely a trace. Roman emperors had harems. Their genetic legacy is negligible. This required something systematic, organized, industrial. The researchers couldn't definitively prove it traced to Genghis Khan specifically, but the timeline matches, the geography matches, and when you understand the caravans, the numbers make terrible sense. Those 16 million men aren't just a scientific curiosity. They're evidence. Living proof that the system worked exactly as designed. Somewhere right now, a man in Kazakhstan or Iran or Poland carries genetic proof his ancestor was a Mongol warrior. But he also carries something invisible, the contribution of a woman who was taken, numbered, allocated. A woman who once had a name, a family, a pattern at her mother's loom, a life stolen in a single morning. He'll never know her name. No one will. but she's there in his cells, in his chromosomes, in the blood that makes him who he is. The cities are gone now. Merv, possibly the largest city in the world, in 1221 news ruins in the Turkmenistan desert. Most people have never heard of it. Urgench, where the Mongols diverted a river to destroy it, is an archaeological site few can find on a map. Nishaper, Balk, Samarkand, some rebuilt, others vanished entirely, and with them went the women who carried their memories. Songs that had been sung for 1,000 years went silent within a generation. Languages died. Recipes, prayers, stories, patterns erased. In 2018, archaeologists excavating a Mongol-era burial site in Kazakhstan found a woman's grave. She was positioned differently from typical Mongol burials, different orientation, as if even in death she was resisting. Isotope analysis showed she grew up in Persia, but spent her adult life over 2,000 miles from where she was born. Her bones showed evidence of at least 6 childbirths, maybe more. Her teeth showed malnutrition in childhood, better nutrition in adulthood, the signature of someone who went from freedom to captivity, from starvation to feeding, from person to property. She was buried with 2 objects: a small bronze mirror, Persian-style, something from her old life, something she'd kept hidden for decades, and a child's toy, Mongol design, from the new one. She was between 45 and 50 when she died. Old enough to have seen grandchildren. Grandchildren who spoke Mongolian, who worshipped the eternal sky, who never knew their grandmother once had a different name. She carried that Persian mirror for 30 years, looking into it at night, trying to remember the face of the girl she used to be. Zarina probably didn't survive to 45. Most didn't. But let's imagine she did. Let's imagine she kept something from Samarkand, thread from her mother's loom, a pebble from her courtyard, a fragment of that pattern she was learning, something she touched at night, something that reminded her she was once Serena, daughter of a silk merchant, a girl who was learning to weave. Let's imagine she whispered her real name to herself every night for 30 years in a language no one around her spoke anymore. Serena, Serena, a word that meant nothing to her captors, everything to her. And on the day she died, she was still whispering it. But her children didn't hear. They'd been raised Mongol. They spoke a language she never taught them. When they buried her, they didn't know what name to put on the grave, so they put nothing. The women of the caravans left no written records, no memoirs, no diaries. They weren't allowed to. But they left something the Mongols never intended. They left their DNA scattered across continents, carried in the blood of descendants who would never know their names. 16 million pieces of evidence. Not of Genghis Khan's triumph, of the women he tried to erase. They lived, they endured, they were silenced. But their ghosts are still here, written in chromosomes. Scattered across 40 countries, carried in the blood of strangers who will never know their names, waiting in the dark. Waiting for someone to remember what actually happened in those carts moving east, in those camps where administrators sorted human beings like grain, in those moments when a girl named Zarina tried desperately to remember a pattern her mother's hands once knew. The silence lasted 800 years, but silence isn't erasure. And forgotten isn't gone.